Hello, I'm Andrew Hara, the host of the Bomb Squad. I wanted to tell you about my movies. All are available on Tubi, which is a free streaming service. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one is a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. Finally, the documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, a family of fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Check out Tubi to watch all my films. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. We hope that you help support us by watching these films. Now, let's start the Bomb Squad.
Welcome to the Bomb Squad, where it's normal.
Guys, welcome to the very adult Bomb Squad.
That's worse. It's worse to say it that way.
Oh, you got even Cringers out. Okay, guys, welcome to the Bomb Squad. Cringer is here. You can only see his nose, but we got a very special movie for you today, and the boys are all back in town. Yeah, no more Moonfalls over here. No more Westerns. Ever again. Just kidding, we'll probably cover Westerns.
It'll come up. That was a
More
good movie.
Cringer time more
What's
than
up,
ever.
Cringer?
He's out
Hi,
of here. What's up, guys? So today on our special episode of the Bomb Squad, special because all our episodes are special.
Yeah, we all make it. It's
Yeah.
hard to make it as, regular old folks to get together at a certain time every week.
Exactly.
It's special.
Exactly.
True.
See?
Even Cringer knows.
We are talking about 1960s Peeping Tom, directed by Michael Powell, written by Leo Marks, starring Calhei's Baum, Anna Massey. That's it, guys. There's only two British people. I can only say so many British names before it starts getting ridiculous. Maura Shearer. I got that one because of the X-Men. Thank you. And so, Josh. No, actually, William. It's been a little bit of a time. Why don't you tell us? Well, before you say that, let me just say the reason we're kind of doing Peeping Tom is because it's like it's considered one of the first slashers, if not the first slasher. It got banned after 5 days of in production. It was the first movie, a British movie, to ever show nudity. It's one of Martin Scorsese's favorite films of all time. And if you know who his editor is, Thelma, she was married to the director of this movie. It's kind of seen as a companion piece to Psycho, even though because it got banned, it came out way later. But interesting history that we'll get into eventually.
Yeah.
But William, tell us what this movie is about.
It's about a guy who has a camera, and he's really interested in filming fear. And he commits a murder, and for the rest of the movie, it's just kind of about him walking around, and you're waiting for him to murder again.
Doing that. Yeah.
Very, very bare bones.
Yeah.
Very bare bones, but it doesn't really feel like it. It feels like, because it is like such a proto slasher, but like even though it's like the first of its kind, it still feels like, I don't want to say it could come out today, but it was like really good. It was really
I
compelling.
Yeah, and I think like when I first saw this film, I didn't see it too long ago. But and I hadn't even heard of it. And then someone was telling, I was like looking up slasher films for stay tuned reasons. Um, and so I just kind of saw this one and I started watching it. And I think what's interesting about this film is like unlike say Rosemary's Baby or some of these kind of films that become staples in the genre, they you when you watch them as a like when you watch these movies after, like so long when they've been cemented in
Right.
film history, sometimes you watch them and you're like, oh, I feel like I've seen this movie
Hmm.
before, and it's not that you've seen it, it's that they've taken so many
Right.
tropes and different scenes and kind of
Its influence is
recontextualized
Right.
them.
everywhere. Yeah.
It feels familiar. The interesting thing about Peeping Tom is kind of like what William was getting at a little bit is that even though it was made in 1960 and it's literally the first slasher film, in comparison to slasher films, it's still quite
Yeah.
innovative. It's a very interesting
Yeah,
film.
it wasn't
Yeah.
like there's like a lot of times in like older films where it can get a little boring or a little dry. We're just so
Yeah.
used to shit being a lot crazier now. But I watched this at 5
Right.
a.m. this morning and I was like hooked immediately. Like there was not one part that was boring
Yeah.
at all. Like it's I think the reason why too is because it never stops being like about the villain and it's just like filthy the whole time. Like it's
Yeah.
just always about
And
bad shit going on.
I think that's one of the interesting things is that if it doesn't try to get you to feel sympathy for the character, it does at least try to get you to understand
Hmm.
him, which like again, you look at Psycho, and even though when they kind of like give you the backstory of Norman Bates, it's still kind of seen as like, look at how weird this
Right,
guy is.
right.
And in this one, it's kind of like, look at how depressing this guy, like, look at
Yeah,
how messed up his life is.
right.
Yeah, it's like a character study
Yeah,
almost.
Definitely.
It's
it very much
very,
is.
yeah, which is not the way of it with like Michael Myers and stuff like that. As
Yeah.
Yeah.
much as Rob Zombie wants it to be.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's such an interesting film. Well, because first of all, like you still see a lot of the influences. One of the main ones is, of course, the Galileo films from the Italians that ended up starting in around the '60s, around the same
Yeah,
time.
the
But this
Giallo.
kind of like the look of the film is so technicolored,
Yeah.
and it's like so like, oh, we're on a set, but we're adding to the set to make it like its own little insular world, which makes it very, very
Yeah, it
interesting.
was like beautiful grunge in a way. Like we went and saw the Red Shoes at the El Paso
Hmm.
Classic Film Festival and like that was like just so, you know, theater can just be so trippy and wild and this wasn't as trippy and
Right.
wild as that, but like you could definitely tell it's the same director. Like all the shots are just like perfect and
Yeah.
so beautiful, but also so original at the same time. Like there's a shot of a piece of cake at one point, like a close up on cake, and it
Yeah.
was like the best looking cake I'd ever seen. Like just like the way that he lights everything just like looks so unique and like so interesting that it's like even if it wasn't
Yeah.
about a killer, which is like, some of our favorite stuff, it would still just be such a great movie to look
Yeah.
at. Like it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think like, and it is that thing where you can view it from so many different angles. Like you can see it from the history of horror films and history of even British films, kind of that. And it's like such a window into the space of like, what did these people think was scary? And I think it's interesting, like, again, if no one had ever heard of a slasher film and they made one, this is kind of what they would make,
Right.
like this is another option for it.
Yeah.
And especially again, like looking through it, how many slasher films today try to like give you the point of view of the killer where it's not sympathetic but it's also not judgmental, and it's like even now you don't really see that too often.
Yeah, I agree.
I was trying to like come up with like what the modern version of this, and I was like,
Abigail.
Creep, kinda.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Creep
Like
is a good, yeah, yeah,
Mark
yeah.
Duplass.
like but even then it's still mostly like the viewpoint is the actual other
Mhm.
person filming,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of from their perspective, so it's a good movie, but it's definitely like
I,
slightly tweaked
Yeah, yeah,
for
Creep
I
sure.
is
want to. I think Creep. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like just like what we were saying, like it's way more about how weird Mark Duplass's character is as opposed to like
Hmm.
what's actually going like in Peeping Tom, they give
Right.
Peeping Tom like just enough backstory. Like they don't go overboard. It's not too undersold. They give you just enough to understand exactly why this guy is like fucked up. And
Yeah.
it was perfect. It was just like you feel bad for him, but you also are still scared of him, and it's like, I feel like that's kind of like that whole deal, like, or adopt a dog or whatever, like to like get sympathy. It's just like
Mm,
show that this person's
yeah,
dad was fucking weird, and it was just so
right,
good. It
right.
was so well done. They didn't try and go too much into it. It was just the right amount.
And I think it's especially because like that scene is kind of like they don't ever dismiss the notion that like traumatized people create trauma, but they also don't excuse that notion
Yeah.
because of it. And I think that makes it again like this movie is like very advanced
Hmm.
psychologically, even though it's very bare bones.
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting things when I'm watching, especially like early British horror, is how much of British horror is kind of set up as like inevit- inevitability. Like a lot of these murders, like the very first scene is shown, which again is very even it takes like 10 years for Halloween to kind of catch up to this. But like we're following the killer's point of view, and he's using the camera,
Hmm.
and we only see everything through his camera lens.
Yeah.
Found footage, guys.
Yeah.
Um, and so then but we know like he buys like a prostitute, and they go up to the room, and he starts kind of taking it. But we know like what's gonna happen because we kind of get by that point that that's the
Hmm.
killer, and it does happen. And there's this weird sense of anytime he's like alone with a woman,
Right.
you're like, oh shit, it's about to happen. When is it gonna happen, and how is he gonna turn it? And it's always a lot different than you think it's going to
Hmm.
be, and it's a lot like almost like it does feel almost like you're watching someone get murdered.
Yeah, it really does. I agree. I feel like the actor who played the main character was like so good at being like a regular guy, but also like just with the creepiest little face. Like whenever he was creepy, he could
Yeah,
turn it on just like so fucking well. But like he did it in a way where it's like you wouldn't immediately just like leave the room as soon as this guy comes in. It was
right,
like this guy could
right,
actually
right.
exist, and he might even have a friend or two, but he's fucking
Yeah,
weird.
yeah, and it is kind of that thing where like a lot of them are you see the girls kind of like at first they're talking to him, he seems a little weird, and then as things kind of progress, there's that like almost pleading, like maybe I can break through to this
Yeah.
guy, and then there's like that awkwardness. And so I was like, oh, okay. It just takes like it just feels very real in dialogue, and I think the fact that like the movie looks so nice and
Hmm.
is clearly like shot so well that it makes it feel like almost otherworldly, which I really
Yeah,
liked.
that's a good way to put it. Like the set design absolutely makes it kind of feel like you're in a dream. Like even like from the
Yeah,
first
so
scene.
to me, it's like half of a stage play
Yeah,
almost.
yeah,
Like especially a lot of like the one-on-one, like when he's talking to the girl's mom and it's only she's lit, and like
hmm,
he's in the shed. It's like okay, it's like very like kind of evocative of that. There are trappings. There are trappings of like 1960s movie. Like okay, so he murders the prostitute,
hmm,
right?
Yeah,
And then he lives in a flat. Everyone's very British in this
yeah,
movie, very extremely
yeah,
British. He and then they catch him peeping in on a party going on downstairs at the flat where he
right,
lives, and then his downstairs neighbor, this girl Helen, is like, "Oh, you're the chap from
yeah.
upstairs. Come join the party," and he's like, "No, just come look at creepy shit with me in my room." He's like,
To be fair,
he's
she
like,
barges
"No."
in. He doesn't invite her. She
Yeah,
barges
yeah,
in.
she is very insistent, but he's like, "Let me show you this movie my father made," and um, she's kind of narrating the whole movie, and it's kind of one of those you're like, oh, they wouldn't do this today. They would just kind of like let it run, and like you'd watch
right.
her get more and more horrified. But she's like, oh my, what is he doing
Right.
now? What's that? It's like, and it's just a little bit like, okay, they didn't really know to like just let it play out like back then, because they're like, you have to like fill this, with someone like kind of like saying what's going. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I see what you mean.
Like
I feel like whenever she was doing that, I was kind of thinking about like just like how unusual it was to watch movies at home back then. And so I was wondering if
Mm,
she was just
well,
like,
yeah,
I guess do like maybe they
his
don't know the rules about like
his whole
yeah,
setup is like such a rich person, because like you would not have all that back then
right
unless you were
or like an
a
enthusiast or
mass
something.
murdering
Yeah,
photographer,
or
right?
that.
But because she's even like, oh, what a strange thing for your father to have filmed. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know, I
Lives it on a boy.
know. Just
Explain. I don't know.
I do love too because I have no idea how common lizards were in the '60s as like a pet or whatever. But she's like, "What's that creature?" And it's just like a little like iguana or
Yeah.
something on the sheet, and the boy's like terrified. You're like, "Oh, maybe that would be
Yeah.
horrific because you've never seen anything like it before."
Yeah, and I think it was kind of to show a pattern of like weirdness that the dad would do, and it's
Yeah,
kind of
like
like,
escalating.
yeah, they kind of show that that's probably why the son wants like to capture fear,
Mhm.
because they kind of say everyone who's been killed is in like this last state of shock. You know, they all died in
Right.
fear,
Right.
and so it's implied that he's kind of chasing, or he says it, I think, but he's chasing after the fear, and he wants to
Mhm.
really see it in their eyes. And I think like it is that thing where it's funny to think about now because what William said was true. Like you don't really have, like people just didn't have access to watch
Right.
movies in the theaters or at their
Right.
house, and so like just that whole idea of how someone would react to that is. I will say that Helen's character, it's like Helen, like she sees him like stalking
Yeah.
her, and she's like, "Oh, he
It's very
must want to
delusional.
talk." It's like, no, buddy, he's gonna murder you.
She is so understanding, and I was so
Right.
certain 5 different times he was
Yeah,
about to kill her. But that's almost the
I
interesting thing is
know.
that I mean, I don't know for like kind of how we're going with like motivation and stuff like with this movie because it's just such a character piece. You just watch it; it's on
yeah.
TV
Mhm.
It's
and
not really like
Criterion if
a
you're a
plot heavy
loser.
movie, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just kind of stuff happens, you know.
Kind of slice of life.
But to me, the interesting the turn isn't you know, with a slasher, you assume like, oh, he's just like a guy who like gets off on like killing people. But near the end of the film, he like Helen's in the room with him. He's like, oh, don't like let me see that you're scared. He's like, because I will uncontrollably like try to like. It's like he's
Right.
Yeah.
aware of what's happening, and he
Yeah.
clearly doesn't want this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like, no, he's like, it's gonna happen. So it's
Well,
like,
and that kind
please.
of ties into that scene earlier where he sees like he's with a girl that he wants to kill, and he notices that there's a cop outside,
Yeah.
and then he still kills her. Like there's nothing stopping him once he kind of sets his sights,
Right.
so to
Yeah,
speak,
like
on
it turns
someone.
on.
And
Yeah,
I think like him kind of explaining that at the end makes it a little bit like worse. It's almost like his dad raised him to be this way, to be kind of like chase after fear, you
Right.
know? And I think it like, I don't know, it just makes him not sympathetic, but it's like, oh man, kind of like what a monster you've
Yeah. It's
created,
just
you
like
know?
fuck. Now this guy's here. What are we gonna do?
Yeah, like this
yeah,
kid never had a
Yeah.
chance, you know?
but like, yeah, his like self awareness is just very. He's like, yeah, no, it's just I'm not. They're like, I'm sorry, but this is gonna happen. If I see you get scared, I'm gonna try to
Right.
kill you. It's like a
Yeah.
And
fact, you know. It's
I feel like
interesting.
you kind of see that a
I,
lot too. Like just whenever he's like doing the killings, like he gets excited, but it's not like over the top necessarily. Like it does kind of like feel
yeah,
methodical in like a way that he is kind of like continuing on this research. Like he seems more excited at the film as opposed to like the killing of the person. Like he seems more like he seems like
right.
someone who solved a math problem in a math movie or something instead
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got this eternal lust for blood.
Yeah, he's like any photographer. He loves getting cool
Yeah.
shots.
Right.
Andrew can relate to him
Yeah.
basically
I
on
can
every
relate to
level.
every part of this guy. Um, and I think I wonder again, like that's what I kind of say about the snapshot, because a lot of there's like my favorite death is in this movie where he's kind of like he's gonna put some girl in a
Oh
trunk,
yeah.
and he's getting her closer and closer, and she's kind of like, get away from me, you know, like and then like you just see her fall and then the trunk close, you
Right.
know, um and I wonder, like, is that a case of, and it might just be a mix of both, but is that a case of they had to do that so they didn't show as much gore as, you know, as they could have, or like that's about as much as it could get, or do they show that because it's saying like, oh, the murders are actually quick because he doesn't get off on the
Yeah.
murders, he gets off on like the lead up, the fear in their
Right.
faces, you
Right.
know. And I think that's like, if that's the case, it almost makes it like that ingenious way where they knew they weren't going to be able to show
Yeah.
the full murder, so they're like, let's kind of speed through that
Yeah.
part and make it part of his character.
Right.
You
And
know?
make the lead up
Yeah,
just as scary as seeing a murder would be for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, how much of this, and of course, I mean, we'd have to like really talk to a historian or something, but how much of this is like, you know, we're
we're 9 years away from the Manson murders. We're like a bunch of like we've left Vietnam, or we've left World War II. We're like kind of about to get started in Korea, but we haven't really seen that much abject horrors, especially like outside, like in a residential area. And I wonder
Yeah.
how much of it is like people just didn't know that much about murderers at this
Right.
point,
I think that's exactly
like
why Helen wasn't even that worried about her neighbor. It's like,
mhm,
He is like, is like culturally like, no, the bad times are over.
yeah,
World War II's
right,
done.
prosperity.
We're getting back on
Yeah.
track.
yeah,
Um, I thought it was a very, it is, this movie is very director brain. That's why Andrew loves it so much, by the way. But so the Peeping Tom, whose name is Mark. I don't know if his name's not even Tom.
Oh
It's
yeah.
Mark. Um,
Josh would
Johnny
have liked
Peeping
it more
Tom.
if his name was actually Tom.
Tom
Josh,
M.
Josh,
Tom Peepers.
Josh would have liked this movie if his name was
Yeah,
PP
yeah.
Tom.
I go by my initials and last name. Tom.
No, but he like by day he like works like a film set.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like a photographer or
He's
whatever,
a
right?
focus
On like
boy.
an
Yeah.
actual film. That's why he has all this film equipment.
Yeah,
And they like have this like director on the set who's like the most hack, like awful director. And at one point, even because he's like filming a scene with one of the actresses, and the director keeps screaming like, "Comedy! We've got to add a bit of
Yeah,
comedy to
yeah.
this. Like, give me some comedy." It's like, oh, the director of this, like someone told him that once, and he's like, "No,
Fuck your
fuck
comedy.
you."
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not funniest.
Comedy is
Yeah.
bullshit.
yeah.
Like it felt very like kind of the Tarantino, like, no, I'm negating your
Yeah.
idea of what a good film
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I love the film.
So it's nice to see that in a '60s film.
Yeah, it was like a little bit of
Yeah, this-
self-awareness in a way.
yeah. There is that little kind of meta-ness to it, because I mean, a large part of this movie is like they're kind of taking these lewd pictures, and he kind of does it on the side. And one of the things is the movie itself was considered lewd, and was, I think the outcry was more towards the nudity than towards the violence.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to kind of see this movie. It's almost like he was anticipating this, and so
Yeah.
he made it part of the story.
That's true. I didn't even really put that together.
Again, so many levels of this. You almost have to do homework to enjoy
Absolutely.
it. But it's a very interesting film, and the camera work, even like again,
So
you're coming off of some of these kind of '60s films where it's like either the camera's very still or it's still like that really shaky cam, and this kind of the movie's constantly moving. The every scene where they're doing the actual camera viewpoint is very like, oh, this is like almost steady cam, but I know steady cam wasn't invented
Right.
yet, so I do almost wonder how they did
I know,
it.
because they're just such heavy cameras, and it's like it looked.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what quality of footage those little handhelds would have been, because this was like pretty high
Right.
quality. I wonder if they did like make some kind of a rig, like a proto rig.
And I went because I was watching a scene from The Exorcist, and they're kind of going up the stairs as they go to as the maid's taking the doctors to Reagan's room for the first time, and we're following him up the stairs. But because it was filmed like 1973, I think 1976, they actually like have someone like on a dolly, and they're just kind of pulling him up the
like
stairs,
tracks or something.
like he's on a swing. No, he's on a swing, and they're just kind of like pulling him up the roof.
Oh.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's how they had to do it before Rocky,
Right.
And so I do wonder, like behind the scenes of this would be very interesting.
It would be. I know that's what's kind of a shame about it being so like hated, is that I bet any sort of like behind the scenes footage is lost. I mean, I mean, there might be stuff, I have no idea, but that would suck if the hate, like, because I was reading about Martin Scorsese like in this movie, like you were saying, and like he saw like a black and white chopped up version of it for the first time, and then he just happened to know a guy who had a color printing of it. So it seemed like it was like, I don't know. It seems like it'd be really easy for any sort of behind the scenes stuff to get lost with nobody liking the film.
Yeah. Well, and also like this movie destroyed the director's career. It kind of blacklisted everyone for a while. And it's also funny that Williams says that, because like imagine Martin Scorsese seen this movie in black and white forever, and then he watches it in color. It's like, no wonder he's always about color.
Right, yeah. Would have blown his fucking gourd.
Usually you're like, hey man, it doesn't matter. Like black and white color, it's sometimes cool. But this movie like is so good in color that I feel like you would lose a lot.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's very like every shot of painting kind of.
Yeah,
It looks
absolutely. Yeah,
great.
I agree. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, whenever I woke up, I was like tired, and I was like, oh, I gotta watch the movie. But then as soon as it started playing, I was just like, yeah, Michael Powell's a fucking visual genius. Like, this is so amazing. Like, I can't believe
Yeah,
this is
so
on
good.
film.
And it was that thing where the first time I saw it again, like you're kind of watching, especially with older movies, like they said, sometimes they can be slow, sometimes they can be kind of
Hmm.
boring. And so I started watching this one with that going in my head, but it's like the movie's so nice looking, first of
Yeah,
all. And then it's just such an interesting because you're almost like at the same time you're kind of watching the movie and you're invested, but you're also like, how did they get away with all this in 1960?
I was
I
gonna
guess
say,
they
yeah, they
didn't because it
didn't.
got
That was
banned.
the thing. Someone made this like this is like such a weird movie because like yeah, like that's why we're just so used to so much more filth and disgusting stuff in our movies because they just
Mhm.
couldn't do that shit, and then someone just gave this guy money to do it, and then everyone fucking hated it.
Right, right.
But it's like it's very
And
telling of
it's
our generation. Like we love this
yeah.
movie because it's fucked up.
Well, and it's funny, like you still, and of course, it's kind of. I think it's that thing where it's probably ingrained in our culture so much, or in film culture, because like you see hints of Maxine in this, which hasn't even come out yet, but the whole like murder on a movie set, who could it
Yeah,
be? You see, like I felt like there's a little bit of Manhunter, especially Michael Mann's
yeah,
Manhunter, in this, where this kind of like there's a scene where he shows the mother, like the mother's standing and she's blind,
yeah.
Manhunter, and he's like showing the videos behind
Right.
her, and and it's like, oh yeah, Michael Mann, you stole
Yeah, you
this,
bastard.
like, but it's interesting. It's so interesting to see like how good it is, and see like kind of maybe a little bit of what we're missing, because I kind of miss this. One of the reasons like Empty Space is so colorful is you miss that in horror films, like that Galileo kind of like bright colors, Suspiria. This movie, of
Yeah,
course. And it's like, I mean, I understand, like you're making a horror film, you wanted the darks to be dark, but
yeah,
sometimes it's at the cost of some beautiful
yeah.
colors.
And I think what's so hard about color is that it's just like the moment you start adding more color in, like it's just like the harder it is to like keep that consistent tone. And
Right,
it's
right.
like I think that's like really the special thing about so much color is like knowing how to use it just like so effectively and like to keep
Yeah,
that theme going for the whole movie. It's like it was really good. It was really beautiful.
yeah. And I think like especially the color. I mean, it's just like I don't know. It's kind of like what William was saying. It's such a nice film to look
Yeah.
at. It's an exciting thing. And I think the reason is because color's revealing.
Hmm.
Like it's harder to get away with stuff in color. I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
me and our mutual friend Kristen, we went to go see Insidious one time, and like in a horror film, you're like looking at every corner, especially if there's a
Yeah.
ghost. And Kristen was like looking, and she caught like cables
Oh,
like
really?
kind of on the floor of the thing that they left
Oh
from
no.
the filming. She was like, "Yeah, because I was looking for ghosts and I saw technical mistakes."
Fuck.
She saw an apple
Yeah.
box.
Yeah.
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 That's so funny.
And so I think that I always think about that when I think about adding color and stuff, because it was like a whole red scene, so you could see
Oh,
everything.
was it like at the end of Insidious or something?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. It's like when they're like kind of walking through the red
right,
house or
right.
whatever. But yeah, funny times. But yeah, and I think like this movie, I mean, it's kind of like it's very unnerving. It's very kind of like you're with it the whole
Hmm.
time. I just think, and also like the ending was kind of like that's the thing that they lost. They can't get it back because it was all really chopped up by British. That's why you don't see as much. But I think even with that, it's very effective, and I think I think a double feature with Psycho. William, what do you think of this? What do you think of this
That'd be
double
fun. That'd be a
feature?
good one. That'd be like a
Yeah,
really great like class. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like if a cool film teacher would do
and
that.
and I think you could almost pick any of them. Like if you paired this with like Texas, or you paired this with
Oh.
Halloween, like seeing like these early horror films, and especially like how they played with. I mean, the perfect one would be you see this one, you see Halloween, and then you see Tetsuo, the Iron Man from
Oh,
Japan,
I've actually never
and
seen
it's
that.
like, oh
That is
man,
fucking
it's
great.
it's
Yeah.
weird too. Yeah, but I think it's that thing where it's like you're like, to me it's very interesting to watch stuff where it's like they had nothing to build off of. You kind of see it again like in those early like Planet of the Vampires, even 2001, where they're making up what they think a space suit would look like,
Right.
you know, and how space would be
What Earth
interacting
would
with.
look like from
Right.
And it's the
space.
same thing.
That's
Yeah.
fucking major.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
I know. And it's the same thing here where it's like, you know, having to, again, one of the things about, and I, you know, it's the famous thing about the Mansomer is because they said like, oh, in the Night Stalker, they're like, people used to leave their doors unlocked and like nobody would really lock their doors, you know, and that stopped after 1969, and it's like, this is the world that you're living in at this time where people aren't really locking their doors. They're very trusting
Right.
of strangers. We had just kind of like finally gotten out of World War II, you know, and the repercussions of it. And so I think it makes it like putting it in context makes it freaky. Watching it outside of context and putting it in a modern lens makes it very interesting. I think it's just there's so many different ways to watch this
Yeah,
film.
they really are. Yeah, I really liked watching it for just to, like, see how this horror genre was kind of coming out of like British dramas in the time. Like just like seeing
Yeah.
like just this
You know,
seeping
like
in.
the half step from one
Yeah.
to the other, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it feels like
It's very
yeah,
strange.
like
Well, it's like, to me, it's like similar to the first Exorcist. You know, where it's like, oh, they're like making something that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. The first
So
Exorcist
they're
is a very
like,
good example. Yeah.
you know, so they're just making a drama, and then also there's like a demon
Yeah.
child in it.
that's
you know?
exactly what
Right,
I mean. Yeah, it's really
I
interesting to
think
see.
Yeah.
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 And I think it's like, again, I mean, I go to sci-fi just because it's so much easier with sci-fi. But I just saw Alien last week, and it's like when I was watching it, there was a brief second when they're like cutting through the helmet and the aliens on John Hurt's face, and I was thinking like, you're there in the 70s. Like, what are you thinking in this moment? Like, what the fuck is that? And is that real or what's
Right.
happening?
Yeah, exactly. Like they've never seen anything
Because
like that.
yeah, and like that stuff looks so good that you're probably like, it's kind of almost why, like, you know, you hear those stories about
Cannibal
the guys who
Holocaust.
refuse this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guys who refuse to leave the theater during Avatar. And it's like, this is kind of what an entire conscience was doing when they would see a movie like
Yeah.
that and be like, there's no way this can be fake because it looks so real that it has to be, you know, and you're looking at this alien thing and it's like, I don't know. It makes it very interesting, and I think like it's why going back and watching these old ones is such a fun time,
Right.
you know.
And like that's just like such a I feel like looking for the realism in visuals is like such a thing that we've always been so captivated by. Like that's video games, movies, what have you. It's like that's I don't know. I mean, obviously everybody wants great visuals, and that's just kind of what I'm saying. But it's great to see where it comes from. We want to see what we haven't seen before. I guess is what I'm kind of getting at.
Right.
And it's awesome to see
Yeah.
all the stepping stones.
Right. And I think, yeah, especially if you want to be a filmmaker, I think this is a good one to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
But
Yeah, this is like Spielberg's one of his favorite movies. Like, this is always one that you
Mhm.
see like when they call something like a director's director. I think that Josh said that earlier. Like
Yeah.
Brian De Palma has called that a lot, but I feel like this is a movie that's definitely like every great director is always like
Yeah.
Peeping Tom. You gotta
I
check
was
this
saying
out.
it derogatorily though, so
you
Huh? Oh, you were saying about Andrew.
You-
Yeah. Besides Andrew.
you know Brian De Palma was all over this movie.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't even leave the seat. Stuck to
What's the
it.
movie where he shows like a sorority at the beginning of the movie? Is that Blowout?
I think
Like
it's
that
Blow.
came straight from Peeping
Yeah.
Tom. Like that's straight up just the first scene of Peeping Tom.
We've been trying to remake Peeping Tom for 40 years.
I just
Yeah.
love it. I just love it.
I know, that's so fun. Brian De Palma, you're my favorite of that group because you're the most perverted.
Yeah, he's a freak. He's canceled as fuck.
Every movie
I
makes is
know. He
canceled.
can't
Yeah.
catch a break. He doesn't want one.
But but it's yeah, I think, you know, it is crazy how available, like this movie's on Tubi, guys. Go watch it on Tubi, support Tubi. Because of stuff like this. I remember when Netflix came out and you could find, I like on my first Netflix queue on streaming was like 400 Blows, Wild
Yeah,
Strawberries, and not necessarily because like it was just like everything
You
was
could
on
finally
there.
see
and
it.
you're
You
just,
could
like,
finally
adding
find it. We didn't have access that much at the beginning of Netflix, even with the DVDs.
No. Yeah, well, and it's that thing where it's like, you know, am I gonna watch 400 Blows? It's like, yeah, at the bottom of the list, but first I'm gonna watch Iron Man 2 again,
Exactly,
you
yeah.
know. But when it was all available, you're like, hell yeah! And I think that's what makes Tubi. This is a commercial for Tubi now. That's what makes Tubi so fun is that you can find these things and like seeing these movies. I mean, we saw it on. It's also on Criterion Collection if you got that. But like being able to see it for free, especially as an up and coming film student, can't beat that.
We should be getting paid by Tubi at this point. I feel like we're always.
I know. Well,
jerking off
we
Tubi.
are.
Oh.
Never mind. Thanks for that 50 cents this quarter, Tubi. I'll pay you back soon. Me and Tubi are like doing the Scarface scene where like the money's rolling. Yeah. But it's just for 35 cents because 200 people saw
it. The 8 cents per ad break on Tubi that hits every 20 minutes. Yeah.
I'll be like, ooh, this one was only 2 cents. This was the last month. Yeah. This is a Borderlands month. But yeah, good movie. Go check it out. I think it's like one of those movies. I think you should experience it. Yeah. You know, I think. I mean, we're saying this at the end, so it does not matter. But if I was you, I would watch this movie first and then kind of come back for this discussion because it is one of those movies. Like we could have broken down the plot, but it wouldn't. Like I could tell you the plot right now. It doesn't really make a difference
because the plot is like 3 sentences.
Yeah, guy wants to kill, does it. He's weird. That's the plot.
Peeping Tom is about a man named Mark. That's all you need to know. But go check it out, guys. It was a lot of fun. I think you'll like it. And when we come back from our break, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a deep dive. We're going to have some special, never before seen episodes, which does mean every episode because you've never seen them before.
They're all new.
They're new to you, and they're new to us because we haven't recorded them.
Watching a movie,
yeah. But we'll see you guys next time on the Bomb Squad. Tell us how your summer vacation plans are, and we'll tell you ours.
Don't tell us that.
Yeah, put them in the comments and then like and subscribe.
Or you can tell us what they are too, and if you don't want to do how they are.
Well, you can tell us if you like and subscribe. Then you can tell us.
If you like and subscribe, send us your address and exactly what you're gonna do.
Which bars, which restaurants.
And all the addresses, and then give us your phone numbers and your social security cards.
It's fine.
And then everything will be good from there.
Yeah, we won't peep on you.
Yeah.